Good morning, everybody. Nice of you to show up. I hope the microphone's okay, and can you hear me in the back as well? Okay, good. So, to be quite honest, I've done quite a few talks at conferences. If you were here last year, you would have seen probably that I did the opening keynote and stuff, and I did an interesting talk yesterday on tools in agile projects. And this one is totally different. To be quite honest, this is the first time I'm doing this talk. So I just invented it, more or less last week. The reason I'm doing this thing is that I've been building web applications for I don't know how long, very, very long time. And I've always struggled with the stuff that's in the CSS and how to deal with all the elements in the UI and in the DOM, et cetera, et cetera. And it's always given me a hard time. Now, I'm not really sure. Are you all experienced in web development, or not all of you? Oh, that's good, because I'm going to do this really slowly, I hope. And I've been troubled with dealing with CSS and getting stuff lined out and getting the pixels right. And if you've done that, you know how elaborate that can be, right? And it can be quite frustrating as well. So, have you seen Joe Natale's session yesterday in the morning? He talked about the UX and the user experience and stuff like that. It was a really amazing session. And the thing is, there is designers and there's developers, right? And developers usually don't know shit about how to do web design. So I'm one of them, right? I haven't got a clue either. So last year, when I was here at DevWeek, I stepped into a session of Shay Friedman, who did a very brief introduction into Bootstrap. And I thought, hey, I need to try this out. I've been building websites all along. It cost me a lot of time to get the UI right. And I looked at Bootstrap and I thought, this will be my savior. Well, being in a church, that's a big word, of course, but it's sort of, well, as Shay puts it, Bootstrap will actually save your life. You can, as a developer, build great-looking websites without big effort. And they really look really nice, right, if you do that. I'll show you one example, because the majority of this talk, I only have a few slides just to do some introduction, and I'll just start typing in stuff and see where it goes from there. So I'm actually going to improvise for over an hour, and hopefully you will bear with me, and hopefully it will work. So I'm going to show you some of the more basic elements in Bootstrap. I'm going to show you what else is there in Bootstrap. But the thing is, you can find a lot of stuff online. So I'm not going to show you all of the elements that are in Bootstrap, because there's quite a lot of them, and it's growing and growing. So there's lots of stuff to choose from. There's also some stuff that isn't in there that you need to find additional libraries for, and I'm going to show you some of that stuff as well. Some stuff to sort of beautify your website even more. And hopefully in the end, I will also try to show you one of the big issues I've always had with web development is there's no reusable UI components, right? If you're just doing plain a JavaScript, HTML, CSS website, you always have trouble with stuff. For instance, if you have a navigation bar or a menu on the top of all of your pages, and you want that to be the same one, usually what people do is they copy it around. Now, if you have 2 pages, you'll be all right. But if you have a big website of, let's say, a couple of hundred pages, you will be in trouble, right? So you need some form of reusable components. Now, I've been doing ASP.NET for quite a few years, and you can easily do that with ASP.NET, right? So I'm going to show you some of the other techniques that you can use for that. So I have to introduce myself a bit, right? For those of you who don't know me, my name is Sander. I'm a sort of independent dev mentor trainer, software architect, programmer. My current assignment is, I just started as an independent 6 weeks ago, so this is a new phase of my life. Got divorced, got a new girlfriend, bought a new house, quit my job over the last, let's say, few months, right? So this is all totally new. So this insurance company in the Netherlands hired me to move their current technology stack, which is basically a mainframe and a bunch of really huge Java applications, into a microservices world. So we are building very, very small components on the server side, and we're building very, very small web applications, but a ton of them, right? So there's no way that we could do without reusable components. Now, this particular Java, I don't suppose you're in the Java space, right? Usually Java people don't go to DevWeek. Okay, so none of you is a Java developer. So in Java, there's also this framework which looks a lot like ASP.NET, just with horrible syntax, because it's Java, right? So we built a whole library of reusable components, and that was a good starting point for us. But you can do that using other technologies. So I'm going to show you a bit about Angular. So this is not going to be an introduction to Angular, because Shay's already done that, I think, yesterday, because he flew out already in the middle of the night. But I'm going to show you how to build some small reusable components using Angular. I'm going to show you our own code examples from JSF, and I'm also going to show you that in a Razor syntax as well. So if I get there, right, because I haven't got a clue to how to time this thing. So bear with me. So this is what I'm going to do, right? So this is my personal website, a lot of stuff on there, a lot of stuff on Agile, on modeling requirements, on software architecture, on microservices, stuff like that. This is my Twitter tag, if you feel the need to tweet about this. I hope to get your response, because this is the first time, so I'm really happy with your feedback afterwards. I wrote a couple of books. Yeah, not much for you in it, because this one's in Dutch, and this one too. This one is in German. But there's also the US version of my Agile book, which is out on Amazon. I'll give you a discount code at the end of the session anyway. So, and I'm also a programmer, as I mentioned. I'll give you one example of that. Stupid story. I was working for the Dutch Social Security Agency, and we were building a web application on top of their huge COBOL installation, sort of like service-oriented architecture stuff in place. And what they wanted is, because they had a lot of users that are using this application, and they were used to using desktop applications. Now, what they wanted is that you couldn't leave a page as soon as you started typing in fields, right? So just to be sure that changes were never forgotten. So you could not move to another tab, you could not close the browser, type in another URL, stuff like that. They had to prevent that using JavaScript. So I was sort of figuring this out, and of course you'd start first with putting alerts on your page, right? You click on another tab, okay, an alert pops up. Now, while I was doing that, the project manager of the project, he was like, so I was the software architect for this project, and he said, you think we could do a demo for the CEO of the Social Security Agency? I said, well, you could always try. There's probably some untested code in there, but if you want to do that, be my guest, right? And so he went off and he did the demo. And after an hour, I got an email from him, live from doing the demo, and he said to me, well, do you think there's any more of these alerts popping up on screen? So this is what I do. I built these little alerts in my pages, and well, I didn't get fired, so anyway, I was lucky. So basically, this will be more or less the agenda. So this is the introduction. I'm going to show you a bit about Bootstrap. I'm just going to show you the website, what it looks like, and then we'll start typing from there. I'll explain to you what the grid system does, because that's by far the strongest element in Bootstrap. The grid system they have, which is very easy to use, makes it possible to build responsive applications, right? So if you close the browser, an error, it will change the views, and I'll show you how to do that. Then we'll move on to a bit of buttons. You always have some buttons, and I'll show you how easy it is to create great buttons in Bootstrap. We'll walk through inputs, checkboxes, radio buttons, stuff like that, fonts and icons and stuff like that. And of course, the inevitable Jumbotron. For those of you who don't know what a Jumbotron is, I'll show you a couple of those. That is by far the most interesting element in Bootstrap, because it makes your websites look as if they were built in 2015, right? And then I'll move on a bit to reusable components, and hopefully this will sort of fit in 1.5 hours. But I haven't got a clue yet, so we'll figure it out, right? So before using Bootstrap, I was building web applications as well. I'll show you the last one I did before I moved to Bootstrap. And I'm still thinking of moving this one to Bootstrap. So it's actually, I'm just going to show you the thing. You probably won't be able to see anything now. I have to duplicate it. But so I hope my internet connection will remain to work. Also, I need to mention that all of the code I have in the demos, that's even more than I'm going to show you, lots of additional stuff to it. I've put it in a GitHub repo, so this is the name of the repo, Hoogendoorn, which is my Twitter tag, Bootstrap demo. There's another one called Razor demo, and you can also look at that as well. It's just public repositories. So the last website I built before I went on to do stuff in Bootstrap, yep, is it moving on? It's not that fast. It's running on Azure website, so it's a, oh, see, oh. Not available. Oh, there it is, right? This here is the website we built. Now, to me, it looks quite nice. But I have spent probably a couple of months getting it to look like this. So it evolves, right? You spend hours and hours, then you move it again. And it is a lot of work, and it's very elaborate. This is, if you would look at the responsiveness of this website, it is okay-ish, right? It moves and moves and moves until it sort of breaks. See here, this is where it breaks down, right? Now, getting this stuff responsive, using media queries to say, okay, if the width of my browser is between this and this, you have to do it like that, and that is, it's annoying, right? It's frustrating to say at the least, and it's always hard to get it right. So if I put it back on in normal size, it looks okay, right? And this is part of the trouble, because you want your websites to be much more responsive, and you don't want to have to spend a lot of time in doing that. Now, going back to the slides, because I have only got a few more. That's the stuff I did before that, and it took me a lot of time, and I hated that. Now, then Bootstrap came on my path. Now, Bootstrap was invented by some guys at Twitter. I just found a screen grab a couple of days ago about what Twitter looked like when they first came out. It was horrible. I'll show you the picture. This is what it looked like. This is Twitter in 1998 or whatever it was. Horrible, right? Well, it looked like it was built in the 90s, right? And it was. Eventually, they came up with this framework to be able to build their website more easily and maintain it easier and make it responsive for different sizes, so you could use it on your iPad or on your tablet and on your phone, and et cetera, et cetera. So it has, and they didn't want to build different versions for every, let's say, for every resolution. So they started building this framework, which is now available as Bootstrap. So they made it open source. You can just look at the code, and it's just out there. So that is basically what you can do. So I'm now going to show you some of the work I did with Bootstrap, and then move on to the typing, right? So this is the current website we're building for the client. It's sort of an internal website to, it's an insurance company, so it's for their own employees. So it's basically not a website, basically it's a web application. And it will also be done by insurance agents. They will use that as well. And in the end, also, Joe Public will start using it as well. So these are some of the elements already in there, like this is a card. I'll show you how to use that card item later on. And it has screens there. You fill in data, and it has grids, and it has buttons, et cetera, et cetera. Now, this is all, it has a very clean layout, and I like that a lot. So I'll show you some more examples. So this is a typical Bootstrap message box. Now, doing the styling for this, I personally did that. So I'm the CTO at this company. You wouldn't expect me to do the styling on the website, but I love doing this, right? I'm a developer. And it only took me, well, the first version looked a bit different. That took me about between half a day and a day. And I restyled it a couple of months ago, and it now looks like this. That took me about 2 hours. So when it comes to saving time on UI development, Bootstrap is your friend. And basically, that's the message I hope to give you during this session, is that if you do websites, and if you haven't got a clue how to do that, move over to Bootstrap, because it will save your life. That was the message. Okay, thank you for being here. And so the next slide is actually the in retrospective slide, right? So this is what I have in slides. So let's do some typing, right? Now I'm starting to improvise. I haven't got a clue to where we go. So let's see. Let's first close off PowerPoint. That saves a lot of memory. This is an old laptop. I bought a new one, but I haven't got it yet. Let's close the browser. Oh, I don't need to close the browser. Let's open it up again. I'm going to start with showing you the Bootstrap website, so you can get an overview of what's all in there. So Bootstrap is on the URL called getbootstrap.com. And you have to in mind that there's different versions. So the current version is the 3.something version. Oh, sorry. Up. So this is the Bootstrap. So this is a jumbotron, right? This big thing that fills the screen. Now the resolution on my laptop is not that high. I probably could set it higher, but you won't be able to read the code. But it sort of changes with every different resolution you might have. So here, this is another Jumbotron, by the way. And this is the overview. If you look at what's in there, there's a very good starting page. And I'm going to copy a template page from that and start typing from there with some typical UI elements in it. And the good thing is that the gallery of most of the elements that are in Bootstrap that they provide styles for, that's basically what they do. So Bootstrap is basically a very huge style sheet, and there's also a JavaScript file. And if you put both of them in, so most of the elements you can use without the JavaScript, but the elements that are on the components page and the JavaScript page need some JavaScript. But don't worry, you don't have to type JavaScript yourself to do this. So if you're not a JavaScript expert, you can still build great moving parts in your Bootstrap application. So here's the overview and stuff like forms and buttons and images, so just script that. And there's lots of samples in here. Now, the thing is, if you look at the stats that are out there on Bootstrap, you will see that it's been estimated that at this point in time, there are over 1 million websites that are actually built on Bootstrap. So I was in the What's New in ASP.NET 5 session just now in the big hall, and he showed the Microsoft website. Now the Microsoft website also looks like it's been built with Bootstrap. I haven't checked it yet, but I hadn't had the time. But it is, right? It looks exactly like this, only they have, instead of round angles, they have straight angles, right? But that's a piece of cake of doing that, right? So there's very, very many websites that are actually built using Bootstrap. And there's good reasons for it. It is by far the best UI framework out there. There's more of them. We tried out another framework called Semantic UI, and there's a few more, but most people stick to Bootstrap. And the good thing about that is that there is a very lively community of people creating snippets of Bootstrap stuff, and I'll show you that later on as well. One of these libraries of Bootstrap elements. A lot of people use it. There's lots of information on it on Stack Overflow, so you will be able to find your way around, even without this talk, basically. So some of its components. And I'm going to build a few of them. So here's the glyph icons. I'll talk about that later on. Stuff like nav bars, the menus that you might have on top of your, or on the bottom of your application. They look a bit like this, and you can change everything about it. Breadcrumb tails, and they have like styles for most of the stuff that you need to build your web application. Like panels, like this is the panel stuff. I'll be building some panels really soon. So you can find all of that stuff. Well, the more advanced controls that they have out there that are part of the Bootstrap CSS and the Bootstrap JS do a bit more. So they have modals, things like drop-downs, so you can click on it and stuff like that. And as a developer, I've built this stuff, right? Trying to get the drop-downs right and align them right and make sure that they are exactly on the same line as the bottom line of the bar they come out of. And it can be really tough at sometimes. And they make it so easy for you to do this. And there's tabs. See, you can click on the tabs and tabs with drop downs and whatever you might do. So there's all sorts of this stuff that you can actually build in with very little effort. So this is the basic Bootstrap website. It's really good. I can recommend, if you start using Bootstrap, first read everything that's on here. I didn't do that because I'm a developer, I don't read stuff. Well, let's get started. So there's a bunch of, so you can download it here. There's a CDN as well, and you can install it with Bowler and NPM or whatever you do. But I'm just going to grab the basic empty page that they have out there, which is this one. And I'm going to just create some stuff for you guys. Right, copied it. Now, as my tool of choice, I love different tools. So the company I work for now works with IntelliJ, which is the Java development environment from JetBrains. Now, if you're in the .NET space, you also know JetBrains, right? Because you should have ReSharper installed. It is, if I code in Visual Studio, never a day without ReSharper, right? It's so much time saving. They have other tools as well. So this one here is a tool called WebStorm, which looks exactly like IntelliJ, but it's mainly targeted at building web applications. So I just downloaded it and installed a trial. I could have used Sublime as a text editor as well, but I chose this one. Right, so let's create a new page and just see where it goes. So a new HTML file, let's call it DevWeek. I already did that last night, so we'll call it DevWeek 2. I could also remove the other one. So this is an empty website. I'm just going to copy out everything that's on the that I got from the Bootstrap page, right? So here's my first page with Bootstrap. So I'm going to show you what it looks like in the browser. It's basically, it doesn't have anything on it outside of some piece of text saying hello world. Right, there it is. That's my first web page. It's running. It's got, if you look at it, it already got the style sheet in here. So here's the Bootstrap style sheet, which is in my CSS directory, of course. And here's the Bootstrap JavaScript file. Now, the convention I use usually is put the style sheets at the top of my pages and put the JavaScript at the bottom. That saves loading time. So what is the first thing we need to do? Well, the first thing we need to do is I'm going to add something called a container. So it's in a div. So I suppose you're familiar with divs and classes and HTML elements, right? So there's a class in the style sheet that's called container. Now there's two containers. You have container and container fluid. And I'll show you what the difference is. I'm just going to type in some header. Let's put in a header 3. You know what? I'm going to make it a div class page header, which is also a style from Bootstrap. And let's type in an H2. First page. And maybe it's small. Let's see where this goes. So now the container thing, this is about the container thing. I'll re-show the web page now, if it works. Right. So what you notice now is that it has moved, the text has moved to the right? Instead of having it totally on the left side, it's now sort of in the middle of the page. Well, it's actually, it's sort of centralized the text in it. What a container style does, it'll actually create borders on the left and the right side of it. Now, the other container that they have is the fluid container. And the fluid container, if you add it like this, what it will do is it will not have the styles on the sides, right? So now it's sort of all over the page. I prefer to use the container thing because I like the edges on the left and the right side to it. So the first thing I was promising to show you is the grid system. Now, if you add, I'm going to add a couple of, let's add a couple of panels to it. Yep, let's do that. So class. First I'm going to create 3 columns in my container. So, and I'm going to use the styles from Bootstrap 4. So they have different styles for different resolutions. So this here, oh, maybe I can use this one. Is it on? Yeah. So the style here, I've added here, is the column large 4. Now, Bootstrap has a grid system of 12 columns. So you can always use 12 columns in there. Except for my client, they are rebuilding the website, and the web agency just moved from the 12 columns of Bootstrap into 2 columns, which is actually a shame because it leaves a lot of space out and stuff like that. So, oh, crap. Should have brought my other laptop. So I'm going to create 3 of these. Oh, wait, let's put in a panel first so you can see something. Now I'm going to create a new element, which is also coming from the Bootstrap thing, which is called a panel. Now, a panel has a heading and it has a body, and I'm going to put some stuff in there. So let's create another div, and the class for that will be panel, where it is, panel heading. Right. And I'll need a panel body as well. Div class panel, where is it? There, body. Right. Let's put some text in it. First column. Well, let's copy some text from somewhere. Just to make it look nice, just add a little bit of text. I haven't got a clue to what I'm copying, but it doesn't really matter. It's just for fun. Right. So now I've created so out of the 12 columns that they have, the 12 columns that you can use, I've created one that's 4 wide. So if I'm going to show you this, you'll see that it takes up some of the page. Oh, where is it? There. So as you can see, I forgot something. I always do. Div class panel. let's do the default. So this is probably it. Right, let's try it again. Right, there it is. So as you can see, I'm going to get rid of the text because it's in my way. Where did I leave that one? Oh, sorry about that. I put it in all my nerves, I've put it in the page header, which I shouldn't be doing, right? So that's better. So it's now underneath the line. So this takes up 1/3 of the space that you have, right? And let's copy this and create 2 more of these to show you what the full width of this stuff is. Right. So what you see now is that I will have 3 of these. And they're nicely laid out. See, it just, already this, I find that very attractive, right? It's like, I almost did nothing, and I still have a full system. And the funny thing is, it's responsive, right? If I trim down, oh, that is very rigorous. So this is using the column large styles that I put in. And since I didn't define anything else, if I make my browser smaller, it will move into this direction. And it will continue to add stuff to it. And you see that it jumps at certain spaces, that it moves on to another media query, so it has like 4 different sizes. Now, you can do funny things with this, because let's say, instead of saying, if it moves to a smaller resolution, you can use the column MD, medium styles for that. Let's say I'm going to make this one 3, so out of the 12 I have, and I make this one 6. Call MD 6. And I'm making the other one 3 again, because it has to add up to 12, right? If it doesn't add up to 12, it adds up to 14, for instance, it will go on to the next line, which is something you don't want, because you want it to be responsive, right? So now what will happen is, at first they are distributed evenly, and as soon as I trim down on the browser, I have to refresh it now, you will see what happens. This is the very small part. See? Just by adding the style, saying, if you're at this resolution between, I don't know the exact numbers by heart, but if you're between this wide, and this wide, so for instance, this would be like putting it out on a tablet, you can use different styles for that.
Why is the margin wrong when you have full screen?
Why is the what? The margin wrong?
Yeah, that's nice. There's more on the left than on the right, but
Is there? That probably is. That's probably the projector, because it doesn't look that way on my screen. It should be evenly distributed, and it likely is. So let's add something more to it. So let's say I'm going to do column small. Let's make the left one 6, or even, yeah, well, 6 is good. Yeah. And I make the other one call small 3, and the third one as well. So what you now will see is that it will start moving again, right? I'm making it smaller. So this is the medium query. And if I'm trimming it down, it will do nothing because my screen has not got the right resolution for this. Or maybe I made it. Didn't I? I don't know. Oh yeah, thank you for that. See? Now it has a different look and feel again, right? And you can move this around any way you like. So that's all you need to do to make this thing more responsive. Now, let's take the next step and see what happens if I have these columns. What about, does the grid system also go for inside of one of these parts, right? So I'm going to copy the whole thing into one of these columns. So I'm going to remove the text from this one. And I'm going to copy the whole block. And just put it inside here. Where's the body? Here. Right. So what I now have done, I've created these three panels, and I made a copy of the 3 panels and put them in the left panel. Right? So just to see where it goes. Now, there's not enough room on here because I put in a lot of text. Maybe I should remove a bunch of these texts. But if you go smaller, it will actually start resizing it again. So I'm now at a much smaller resolution, the small one actually, So it now nicely puts down the full width again. So basically, because my screen and this screen have a very low resolution, if I would be able to pull it into, like, say, an 1800 resolution, then you would see that it nicely shows up, but it just put too much text in it. So don't go too small, and you don't put too many items in other items and make it smaller. But you see that it sort of keeps on working with you, and it's basically, if you would open this up on a mobile phone, it would probably look like this. That's not bad, right, for 5 minutes of typing. It's pretty nice, actually. So that's the first part about the grid system. It sort of works for you. You don't have to do a lot for it. Just make sure that the elements on your pages and the elements in your columns actually work together well to, sorry.
There are 12 grids inside the 12 grids inside the left column.
Yes, there is. So that's actually what I should tell it. Yes, true. So it again distributes evenly, because if I would make that one larger, you would be able to see that. So let's make this one an 8. Then I would have to make this one a 2, and this one a 2 as well. Right. So hopefully you will be able to see it better now. So now it distributes them evenly within the left column, right? So again, this is a 12-column grid. And if you would then copy the whole thing again in the left column of the left column, then you would see the same result again. So if I move it slower, but then again I have to, I would have needed to, oh, you can see it now. See? So it does the same thing as it does on the boing, on the columns now. It's now in medium size, which means I put in the styles that this one is a 6 and a 3 and a 3. And I did the same for this one. So you can see that the width for this one is twice as wide as the other two. So it again uses the same grid system within each of your columns. So it's very, very flexible to use this. So I love it a lot, and it makes life very, very easy. So that's basically grids, and I'll show you a bit about panels. Now I'm going to show you some other stuff about panels just to get rid of it. If you look at Bootstrap, Bootstrap has a number of sort of predefined styles that you can use for basically stuff like buttons and panels, and it has a number of colors. Now these colors have to do basically with if you want to show sort of error messages, like, so there's a color, there's the primary color, there's the default color, and then there's the warning and the danger colors that you could use to style this stuff up. But you could also use it to sort of restyle and recolor everything you do. I will do some recoloring later on. So just to make sure that you've seen this, so I've now used the default one, which is the gray background on it. So I'm going to put this one in primary. I'm going to put this one in, let's say, the danger one. Right. So if I open it up again, you see that the colors now have changed, right? So these are the basic color sets that Bootstrap comes along with. And there's two more. Let's see if I can do some other stuff, like panel warning. And panel, what else is that? Panel success, right. So these are the rudimentary colors that they have. Oh, I had a typo, I guess. Which one was it?
You did change to the header.
I did?
And then the classes.
Oh, here, yeah, sorry. You're right. Yep. So they look a bit light now, but if you look at this, they use the same color scheme on the buttons as well, for instance. And on the buttons, they look much more fresh. But you can change the colors any way you like. So what you could do is, to change the colors yourself, is eventually you will not have enough coming from the Bootstrap CSS itself. So you will create additional classes to it. There's no way around it, because you're not going to use the default color set, because everybody sees, oh, this is a default Bootstrap site. And they even bothered to change it a bit around to make sure that you didn't recognize it immediately as a Bootstrap site. Most of these Bootstrap sites are very well recognizable. So you can change it, and what you do is you add your own style sheet to your pages and add the additions to Bootstrap in there. For instance, if you want to change the color for the default thing, you can do that. You can also use less, by the way. If you have any experience with less, you can change the less style sheet and it will recompile to CSS, and you get the new Bootstrap CSS, which has your definitions in it. But I usually prefer to add my own stuff to, that I change on the Bootstrap stuff to an additional style sheet that I keep on my pages, and that makes sure that it runs in the colors that I need. So, what's the next step? Well, the next step is, there's a couple of ways we can go now, but I would probably say, let's look at the buttons now. Because the buttons are a very fine element in Bootstrap, and you need buttons all the way. So let's get rid of most of this stuff that I now have here. Roughly that. Well, let's get rid of this one as well. Oh, wait, I'll just leave the outer class to it. Chip. Right. Yep, I'm good. So let's call in a button. Now, there's different ways of creating a button. You can say, I'm going to do an input of type button, and you should use the classes that come out of Bootstrap. Now, the main class for buttons is called the BTN class, right? So that's about it. That's all you need to do to create a great stylish Bootstrap button. But there's, again, the additional styles, similar to the panels, that you could say, I'm going to do a button primary. And it needs to have text, of course, so in an input that would be, click me. Very original. So now I have, if I'm correct, created my first button. And this is what it looks like. This is the primary button on Bootstrap. The primary button style. Now they have other styles, of course. So I'm going to show you another style again, using a different layout. So I'm now going to use a button. The button also has the classes, so you need the BTN class. And I'm going to do, let's say, a danger button. That looks dangerous. This is, well, button. Let's put in button. Right. So that's basically doing the same. And then now I have two buttons, right? A red one and a blue one. You see how easy it is, right? It's just done all the work for me, because it's all in the style sheet. Let's create another one. And this is the one I usually use. It's just an anchor with an href in it. I'm going to point it to my home page so to show you what you can easily do with Bootstrap. And again, you use the same classes. So I'm now going to use the button and the button warning class, which will give me an orange one, warning. Right, so this is an anchor, and it should work. So now I have three. Oh, the column isn't big enough, right? So let's remove the column and just put in a row, just to be sure. So there's three. So you might wonder why it jumped out on the left side of this. That is because I now used a row class. Now the row class is actually sort of a container to contain your columns. Basically, you should always work from columns, but columns usually fit into the row. Now the row has an offset of sort of 10 pixels to the left to make sure that if you put columns in your row, that they will have the right width. So I'm going to put in one column again, just to show you that it will work. Div class, column large, 12. Put the other stuff inside it. Now it will probably, hopefully, fit within, right. So it's now nicely aligned with the rest of the stuff. That's basically because I put the column inside of the row. So basically, you can use containers and rows to contain other stuff. Now, I got three of these. Let me show you the main page I created for this talk. This is basically my table of contents. So this is me, an introduction. So this thing here is called the Jumbotron. It's just a thing that is full width, and you can do nice things with it. Well, you have to do the nice things yourself, of course, but this is basically what a Jumbotron does. So this is all, there was a nice discussion in Joe's session yesterday about should you do this full width controls and then move down on pages, but it seems to be very popular these days. So try that as well. So then I said, okay, let's add some stuff to deal with buttons, and we can go to the button pages as well, and moving to input elements and then with Angular. Now, I'm not really sure whether you like the colors on the page, but it looks really fancy coming from a developer, right? This. You have to agree on that, right? I built this whole thing in about an hour. Now, but I know a little bit about Bootstrap, not too much, but just enough to make this happen. Now, that gives you a bit an idea of the power of Bootstrap. So let's continue with the buttons. So what's the next thing you could do with the buttons? Well, one thing you could do is you could say, I'm going to put a div around the buttons, and I'm going to put them in a button group. Now, they will slightly change now, and again, Bootstrap does all the work for you, because what it will do now is we'll put the buttons, well, where did I go? Where's my page? Oh, just go back. So now they're nicely aligned like this, but if I want to group them together, you see that they have these little round angles here, right? So if I want to group them together, the style sheet actually should remove the inner round angles here, right? And it does. So if I now refresh the page, they're nicely aligned in a group. And all it takes is adding a div around it, and you're there. Now you might wonder, could you also do that vertically? Yes, you can. So the next step could be, I'm going to put in the button group vertical. Right. Refresh again, and it looks like this. So I hope you can all understand that is, having done this for years and years and years, this has made my life much and much easier just to have this on site. So let's put in the next element. Well, we could have two ways. It's probably best to look at inputs first. So what's with the inputs? And I might have to look at my pages again because I always forget the exact phrasing of this. So let's put in a paragraph. And let's put in an input. Input of type, let's say just text. And what else do it need to have? A placeholder. So type your name here. And that's about it. This is a basic input element, right? Now, if I show you how that looks, it's rather, doesn't look really fancy, right? So if you want to make it look fancy, there's a class involved again from the Bootstrap framework. And if I'm correct, it is called a form control. Now, hopefully it will look a bit better now. Bang, there it goes. This is the same element, just added a Bootstrap style to it, and it will look much nicer now, does it? You don't think so? Oh. It also picks the full width, right? So it picks the width of the element that it's in. So in this case, I put it in a 12-column thing. So if I make that 6, you will see that it will nicely behave and be half the size of it. It's that simple. Cool, right? So let's move on. Let's add a label. So most of the controls you have will have a label to it, right? And you always want to keep that label with your control itself. So to do that, you need to give it an idea. So I have no idea. And let's add a label to it. Oh. Label. And it's a label for the no ID thing. See, that's what I like about these IDEs. They just fill in this stuff. There's only one thing I don't like about the WebStorm IDE, is that if I change the starting tag of a class, like I want to move this to an H1, it doesn't change the end tag as well. To me, well, they could have done a slightly better job on that. Let's put some text in. So I'm going to say, you know what, you have to type your name. So name, first name. So now I have a label on my control in my input box. And it looks nice again, right? And if I trim it down, you see that whatever I do, it will stick with the input box it's with. So can you make it even better? Yes, you can, but I have to check that out, how that works, because I always forget how to type that. But there's a good reference for it. So I'm going to add a div around it, call that div an input group, which means I can now, oh, why does it do that? And I put these things in the input group. No. And now I have to check the code from my example, because I have an input page somewhere, because I always forget how to type this thing. Yes, put it in the input group. Put the label outside. Right, that's what it looks like. So I'm going to copy this line of code. I hate copying lines of code, but I always forget to type it, how to type that right. And I do want to show you this. So I'm going to add a small add-on thing. Oh, let's comment it out. Get the label outside of the control. So I'm going to put that on top. Yeah, that looks better. And I need to do some extra work here as well. Say, oh crap. Go to the other page again. I'm going to copy in this line as well, just because I always keep forgetting how to do that. Right. So let's make this username or first name. Let's make it email. That's not much nicer, right? So now it has an email add-on. And I need to add this one, so it will actually find the add-on to it. And if I show you this one, I hope I'm doing it right now. Let's see if this one works. And it does. So I now created this small add-on to my input box with to show you that this is actually going to be an email, right? That looks nice, right? You can also have them on the right side, of course. So probably that works well. If I pull in the class that's called pull right, I'm not really sure whether this is the right one. Let's check. It isn't. Okay, you're bound to make mistakes during live typing anyway. So input group. I got it somewhere, right? I had it on the right side. Maybe it's just that simple. And if I would put the span after the input, then it would just arrange it. I have to get rid of the pull right again, of course. Hopefully this is enough. Bang. Let's see what now happens. See? So it's nicely on the right side now. It's just as easy as it is. Now, the next thing I'll show you is that Bootstrap comes with a set of icons. Well, they're not really icons, actually. It's a font. And it's nicely displayed here. And it's called the Glyph Icons font. So it's actually a real font that you can use to sort of beautify your elements in the pages you have. So these actually aren't images, they're characters actually in this particular font. So if you use this font on a style, it will actually display the character you have on that particular location using one of these sort of images, which are not images. And you can actually use this one easy to get things better. So let's change this thing again a bit, saying I don't want to have a simple character here, but I want to have this great looking thing. So here's the add-on. I'm going to put in another span in here with a class on it, which is called Glyph Icon. This is the base class for it. So an email. So what kind of thing we could use for that? Something like an envelope or something. Oh, yeah, I'm going to use the envelope one, just to make sure it works. So Glyph Icon, oh crap, I have to type it. Glyph Icon envelope. There it is. Right, let's add the closing tag to that. Oh, it doesn't. Maybe you cannot put a span inside of a span, so let's make it an I. So what this thing will do, if it works, it will create an icon. Well, it's sort of an icon. It's actually basically just a character in a different font. So these styles, which are in the Bootstrap CSS, maybe you can look them up. Well, actually, so I used the minimized CSS, so it's probably hard to find. Let's see if I can find it. Glyph Icon. So there it is. I don't like the scroll bars on this one. So it basically says that the font face for this one is called Glyph Icons Halflinks, which is basically the font that they use for that. And they will plug that in to any of these particular styles that are in there. So if you have a Glyph Icon repeat, what it will do, it will create, on the before tag, it will create this particular content with just that character from the font, actually. So hopefully, if it works out, on my page, instead of having this character here, I will probably now have an envelope. Now, these icons, you can use them for just about anything, right? What most people will do is put them on buttons, for instance. Let's do that. Let's get where the buttons were. So you know what? I'm going to, inside of my anchor, create a span. And you can use it with span or the eyes, it doesn't really matter. Saying, OK, it's a glyph icon. And since it's a glyph icon that points to my home page, I'll probably type in glyph icon home. There. So now I have it. Let's put in a space here, just to make sure that it looks nice. Whoop. Go back and see what now happens. See? That is cool too, right? And people use this a lot. If you look at Bootstrap websites, so if you have buttons, like if you go to your, for instance, if you go to your Gmail account, you will see a lot of these icons as well. And the glyph icon set has around 250 in the meantime. So it grows and grows and grows. They add more stuff to it. So there's lots of icons to choose from, right? So that is really good. So you can use these icons everywhere. Now, there's two things I still want to tell about this. This is not the only font you can use. There's multiple of these fonts out there. It's just that this one goes with Bootstrap, so you can use it automatically. But if you want to add your own other font to do icons, you can use different things. The one we use a lot is a font called Font Awesome. And it has a bigger set of icons. If my connection works, yada, yada, yada. Web page is not available. I don't know why it does that all the time. Crap. Wait, let's go to the page of Font Awesome anyway. Bang. Don't have to go through Google. Okay, this is a very slow connection. Anyway, what I'll show you in the meantime, because I've already, oh, there it is. I've already need a custom font in Font Awesome. No, I don't. I just need the examples, and I need the cheat sheet. So here's another font. And the nice thing about this font is that it scales, right? So you can use it 5 times, 4 times, 3 times, 2 times, etc., and large. So there's different sizes on it. But I want to actually see the icons. So they just have a much bigger set, right? It has around 450 of those, and you can use them in your pages as well. So what you need to do this, first of all, you need to download the font, of course. And basically the font, again, Font Awesome, is a style sheet. And there's some JSS as well. So you need to add that to your page. So if I would do that, let's just do it. Just add a link to the href, which means CSS. It's in the CSS me thing, I think it put it. The Font Awesome style sheet, right? So again, this is just offering you a bunch of these styles to sort of beautify your pages. And I'm not really sure whether there's some JavaScript in there as well. No, I don't think so. So what you now could do is you could use a different set called the FA set. So the base class for that one is FA, Font Awesome. And you could say, I want to have Font Awesome home. Oh, crap. It's basically the same icon, just from a different icon set. So hopefully this will work as well. See, it looks a little bit differently. You might think, oh, this one is smaller. So what you could do, and that's a nice thing they added to the Font Awesome font, is you could say, I want the FALG font size. So if you look at that, it will grow bigger. Just by styling the little icon. So let's do this. The biggest one they have is this one. And, well, it gets quite big, right? And it's just that easy. So you just download the font, put it in your directory. It's a style sheet. You plug in the style sheet, and it will work for you. Now, this is just a way to move around with buttons and icons and inputs. So this is a good start to create forms like login forms or data entry forms or whatever you do. So it's good for a lot of things, right? So I'm going to take you to the next step. And we have to do the Jumbotron. So I'm now going to see if I can type in a Jumbotron. And I'll try to show you how quick you can make it more beautiful to it anyway. So let's get rid of the 5 times because it's a little bit big. So what I'll do now is I'll add something called the Jumbotron. This is the moment you've all been waiting for, right? This is basically a pointless element in Bootstrap, but everybody's using it, and it looks like fun, right? So div class Jumbotron, and that's basically it. Let's type in something. Let's type in a header 1. This is a very small keyboard. So this is the DevWeek Jumbotron. Let's add some more text to it. I don't know if I have any text on my page somewhere. Can I use this? Use a text sample from somebody. Right. Oh. Hop. Let's put it in, see what happens. Go back to my page, see what happens. There it is, my Jumbotron. Now, the Jumbotron is now inside of the container, right? So this is one way of using it. You can use it inside of the container. But what you could also do is use it outside of the container. And if you do that, it will look slightly different. Where did I put it? Right there. So I'm now going to get it outside of my container. Just put it in the body and see what happens now. So if I rerun my page now, it will have taken over. Now, you might not think that this is a good idea to put it totally on the left side, right? But that's why we have the container class for. So I'm going to put in a container in between, and it will look OK. Div class is container. Right. Bang. Now again, even though we now sort of centralize the text in it, doesn't really attractive, right? This gray background is not really attracting people to your website. So you could do all sorts of stuff with it. I'll show you what I did with it. First of all, let me, you know what, I'm going to add in my own little thing to show you about images as well. Div class is column large 8. So I'll put in the text in here. I'm going to put in another column, div class col large 4. And I'll put in some other stuff later on, but I'll show you where you can go with this. So first of all, let me redraw the page. It's now smaller because it's not taking all of the sizes, all of the full width again. So it sizes nicely again. So this is the jumbo if you do it like this, and et cetera, et cetera. So it grows and grows and grows, right? And even the font gets larger, see that? So, now, the next thing is you want to beautify this a little bit. Now, I've been experimenting with this a while. So what I did is I created a small style sheet. I called it home. Don't know why, but I just did. And I created this style. I call it Jumbotron Blue. Now, it's a good habit. So it's the way Bootstrap does this. It has a base class for stuff, like the BTN class, and it has additional classes that add to that class. So you usually have to use 2 styles in your div or in your span or whatever you do to make the stuff happen. I'll show you that with the selects again later on. And I sort of do that in the same way. So I created this Jumbotron Blue style, which adds on to the Jumbotron style as well. So the Jumbotron style doesn't really do much. It's just a gray area that you can put stuff in. So what I did here is I sort of copied this particular image. It's actually the background coming from, I stole it from the GitHub website. So it's a nice transparent background you can use in your images. And I've also found a website that actually creates these transparent, semi-transparent backgrounds for you. It looks really nice. I have a resource page as part of the demo where I put up the resources that I used. So if you look it up on GitHub, you will be able to see that page as well. So I created a page, a background drop element, and I set it to a color, and I centered it. So if I now add this simple style to my page, the Jumbotron Blue style, now you might see that it doesn't recognize it, That is basically because I didn't put in the style sheet. Now, if you add style sheets to your Bootstrap application, you need to make sure that you first add in the Bootstrap style sheet. So this one, this is the Bootstrap minimum style sheet. And then add your others to it. Because what it will do is, well, that's not specific to Bootstrap, but to HTML and CSS anyway. So it will first pick up the styles coming out of this one. So there's a Jumbotron style in here. And if you want to add to that style from your own style sheet, you should put your style sheet below the Bootstrap style sheet. It basically adds on to what you're doing, right? So I've added this, I'm going to create this, oh, shit, crap. No, I don't want that. So let's see if I can find the home CSS. Yes, I can. It's relevant, and it's the style sheet. Right. So now let's go back here, and if I'm right, then it will recognize my style. So see what happens now. I just added the style and just added in a backdrop and a color. Let's see what it looks now. See, this is already much better, right? Isn't that cool? And it's basically easy. You go to GitHub, you steal the background drop, you just copy it out and copy it into your directory. And you have some nice, can you see the backdrop? Can you see all the little icons that are in there displayed? It's a bit hard to see with all the lights on probably, but. So this is good. So what I'll do next is I'll show you a bit about images. So I'm going to create, in this particular one, I'm going to create an image. Find the source. Where did I put it? Probably be in the images directory. Yada, yada, yada. There it is. And let's see, I can use my avatar. Let's see what happens first if I do this. So I'm just putting in an image. See what happens. So it'll be on the right side somewhere here. I haven't got a clue to what it looks like now. Oh, it's pretty big. This is a drawing my then 7-year-old son made of me. It has a good, it sort of looks like me. So I kept that one. So now you can add styles to it from Bootstrap. So this is just basically a plain image, right? So let's add a style to it. So I'm going to use the image styles. Let's make it a circle, right? So, dang, now it's a circle. That's cool, right? Just by adding some stupid stuff, you can make it more beautiful. I'm going to add another style to it. It's called the thumbnail style. Let's see what happens now. See, it puts a nice edge around it. It's a little bit bigger now. So I created another style additionally to it. I call that the image small size. I'm sort of keeping the naming conventions they use. So if I go to this particular thing, the only thing I did is I limited the height to 120 pixels. So I put this in my home CSS file. So what you will see is if you start developing with Bootstrap is that you think, okay, I'm going to do this slightly different. And you just add it onto your own style sheet, and your own style sheet will grow a little bit. But I would definitely keep it as minimal as possible if I were you. So now it's a bit smaller, and I can add more stuff to it. What I probably should do is I will probably want to center it inside of my, where did I put my page? Right here. Inside of my column. Let's add some text to it. Yada, 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 a paragraph. Did I still have some text? Oh, yeah. This is the DevWeek Jumbotron. Oh, that's the other text. Well, basically it doesn't really matter, right? So now see what I've done now. That doesn't look nice, right? You want to be able to center that instead of having it left aligned, and they have a style for that as well. So what you now could do is you could say, I'm going to add this style here called text center, and it will sort of pull it together and say, okay, you know what, I'm going to do it like this. And I added another style myself because I like adding styles to it, because I think the font is now a little bit too big. Well, I don't want it that. I think I called it text tiny. It's somewhere in my style sheet. Oh, there it is. So it sort of looks the same as the styles from the Bootstrap file. So the only thing I did is I said, just make the font 14 pixels, and that's important, so don't overrule that by other stuff, please. Looks a bit better. it's a little bit close to the other one, but you can solve that with some padding maybe, or adding some other styles to it, or put the other one in a paragraph as well. So I'm pretty close to what I did on the other page as well, right? So the Jumbotron element is an element that you can use to draw attraction to it. And if you look at the image styles that they have, this one is the image styles are pretty okay, right? You can use thumbnails, and you can create rectangle images and round images and stuff like that. So it will work for you. One of the nice things I found, I have to show you this, is Lorem Pixel, I think it's called. There's a website that sort of presents you with random images. And you can get them in any size you like. I like this website. Just found it yesterday. Just had to show you. How much time do we have anyway? Is there like... Sorry?
25 minutes.
I still have only 25 minutes, right? Oh, cool. So I'm not going to show you this one. Look it up yourself, because my connection's too slow anyway. So let's move on a bit. So where do we go from here? Well, the next step I think would be is to introduce the navbar element. The navbar element is basically used to do menus. So I'm not going to type it in total, because that's a lot of work, but I am going to show you, because I created a page that actually does that. So here's the navbar element, and let's get all this stuff out first. I think I put in 2. I'm going to remove this one just for a sec. So navbar elements, you can put them on top and you can put them on bottom, and they're basically used to get the menus. And you can recognize Bootstrap sites really easy if you look at the navbars, because they're basically have the same layout, all of them. So what I did is I created the navbar. Inside of the navbar, I put a container, which means that everything which is inside of the navbar, or the menu, you might call it the menu as well, is also having a left and a right indentation, so to speak. And I've put in the navbar header, which is basically a class from Bootstrap. In the navbar header, what I did, I created a button. Now the button looks a bit difficult. What it actually does is it will say, it will add the collapsed style to it. And it will collapse using the data target, my bar, which is this whole thing, as its alternative. So I'll show you what it does. And I've put in a nice font awesome icon in here as well. And then I added a link to home saying, hey, these are my Bootstrap banners. You know, I'll replace this with DevWeek. You know what? I'll make it strong even. Dev, because that's the way the logo sits, right? So now if I run this page, what you'll see is that it will actually show this navbar on top of my page. So this is a different page I'm using now. I'll have 2. Okay, but I did something else with it. Let me check, because I sort of damaged something. So this is always good, right? You have the developer tools from Chrome in this case. So here's my navbar. So it's basically this thing, but I sort of have this blank space on top of it. So I'm trying to figure out what that is. And I have a padding of 50 on top of it. So if I remove this one, it will look fine. So this is coming from my own style sheet. And I had a reason for doing this. And I'll show you in a sec why that style is there. So basically, this is now what my navbar looks like, right? Here's my DevWeek item that I have on the left. And here I put in the rest of the menu. Now, looking at the rest of the menu, what you will see is that it is an unlinked list inside of a div. So here's the div. This is the navbar collapse. And I'll show you what that style does in a second. And here's my, Here's my unlinked list containing all the elements. So what I did is, you have to put in the nav style, so it's the starting point for all this stuff. And there's a navbar nav style that you also need to add into it. You don't need this one. I'll show you what it does when I remove this one. And then I just put in the list items in here. It's just basically, they're now empty anchors, but it doesn't really matter. And I put in a drop-down, just to show you how drop-downs work as well. Now basically, a drop-down in a menu works like this. You create you create the list item, which has the style drop-down. Then you need to create the item, which is an anchor, that actually shows what you can click, and then the rest drops down, right? So what this makes this thing special, so it's basically just an anchor, and it has the class drop-down toggle, which is a Bootstrap class. It also has this little thing here. Now the data toggle element, if you put that to drop down, it will start recognizing that it needs to drop down something. Now it doesn't really know what it needs to drop down. So basically, where does it come from? Oh, it comes from the drop-down menu style. So if you put it inside of this one, create the drop-down toggle button with this data toggle element in it, and you create a drop-down menu, which is also a style belonging to Bootstrap. If you put that all together, you will see what happens is, it will first show, I don't know if I changed anything. Oh yeah, I put them on the left now. So the 50, the padding of 50 is now back. But so here's the main button. Now if I click that, what it will do, it will use the toggle to show up the other stuff. Now, as far as I go, this is by far the most complicated piece of Bootstrap that you will find. It doesn't get any more complicated than this. You just have to figure out, okay, this is a data toggle. Since it sits in a drop-down, Bootstrap will find out what the element is that it needs to open up. So it's the second list, right? It's this list, basically an unlinked list again of 3 items, and it will show that up. So you also see that it has moved to the left now, basically because what I did, I removed the navbar right class from the navbar. Now, there's a bunch of other styles you can use with the navbars. For instance, there is the navbar inverse style. And if you do that, what you see will happen is it will inverse the colors. Independent of what colors you're using, it will inverse the colors. Now, if you have a longer page, like my home page, let's type it in. There's something else that you probably would want to do. Now, I have a navbar here as well. It's a very small one. See here, you go to the resource pages that I created with another very ugly looking jumbotron on it. So here's the list of resources that I used to do these demos. And they're all on the GitHub repository. But the thing is, what most people would like is that if they scroll down on a page, especially if they're longer, is that they can still see your menu, right, your navigation bar. Now that wasn't in Bootstrap until a while ago, and they just added it to it. So what you now see is that it will remain on top. See, it's still there. And you might think it looks ugly now because it's just floating through the rest of the elements. That is true. The reason that it does that is that the main navbar class does not have a background. So it doesn't. So if I will show you what happens here if I put the inverse on. Because the inverse has a background. So the way to do this, by the way, is to add this little style here. Is the navbar fixed top style. Just by adding this thing, it will keep on top if you scroll down your pages. You don't have to worry about all this stupid JavaScript that you need to pull in to do this. It's just working. Let's pull the navbar inverse in here. Right. Let's open it again.
Can you use the nav tag for that?
Sorry?
Can you use the nav tag for that instead of div?
Yeah, you can, yeah. Did I use the div tag? Yeah, you much better do this as a nav. Yeah, it does that. I've probably done it on the other one. Where's the other one? Navbars there. Yeah, see, I used the nav tag here. It's what it's supposed to do, right? So, yeah, I should have done that. But the div tag works as well. It's basically the same thing. What did I do? Oh, yeah, I made it black now, so it's inverted. And now you will see that it will look, if I scroll down, you see that it will nicely stay on top, right? So to do that with the default Bootstrap nav style, you need to add a background color to your navbar. So let's go back to the navbar page, if I still have it. Yeah, there it is. So the thing is, I've done the same here, but there is an additional small thing you need to do if you're using the navbar fixed top. What it will do is, it will actually, if I don't do it, wait, let me get that, because you probably won't be able to see it here because the jumbotron jumps in too low. What I did here, I added the padding top of 50. So if I remove that, it will be okay. And the reason you need to do this is that it will, at first when you show it, it will go over the element that's underneath it, right? If my jumbotron on my home page, where's my home page? Go back to the home page. So if the Jumbotron on my homepage had text that is really to the top of it, it would look like this if I open up the page. That's why I put it in, so the navbar has a height of 50 pixels, so I did a padding on the main page, on the body, of 50 pixels. I'll show you what happens if I remove that. And well, you can see that on the Bootstrap site. So here's the padding. If I remove that, see, it removes, now it's okay because it looks like my Jumbotron is quite okay. But you see here, it doesn't really fit, right? That's basically because it's overlaying the element that's underneath, in this particular case, the Jumbotron. So that is why you have to have, if you use the navbar fixed top, you have to have 50 pixels of, oh crap, where is it? 50 pixels of padding to it, right? So it doesn't overlap your other elements. Okay, so that's the navbar part. Now, as I only have like 50 minutes, because I said I didn't know how to time this exactly, I'm going to show you a little bit more advanced stuff. So there's lots more in the demos you can look at. Oh, I'm just going to show you anyway, to the homepage. And you can do lots of nice stuff with checkboxes, for instance, because basically a basic checkbox looks like crap. This is crappy Windows-style checkbox, right? So there's a nice little framework that I use for that. It's called Awesome Bootstrap Checkbox, and I put the link up on here. That will actually show you that you can have checkboxes that looks much nicer than this particular one. So I'm just going to, instead of sort of typing it all in, I'm just going to show you what it does. Right, hope it works. So basically, if you add the styles of this particular checkbox library, small library that it does, the only thing you need to do for it is change the position of the label inside of the checkbox and add the styles to it, and you have much better looking checkboxes here. You can even use the primary and default and warning styles, etc. for that as well. So here's the danger style and the success style, and the default one is this. And it looks all really great. It doesn't add a lot of complexity to what you have to do for that. Because if you look at the code, the only thing I did is actually I defined a checkbox. Can I zoom in on that? Yeah. Well, it doesn't. It just scrolls down. Does it? Yeah. So I defined a text box like this. This is basically a normal text box. And added the label inside of something called the div checkbox. So this small little library, what it does, it will create these nice little looking elements for you. And you can use them with the primary style, so here's checkbox primary, checkbox success, etc., etc. Now, the only thing I needed to do for that is added their style sheet, which is called the Bootstrap checkbox style sheet. And there's also a JavaScript file that goes with it. Oh, no, there isn't. Oh, no, it's the new version that does that automatically. So it does that for checkboxes. It also does that for radio buttons. So I'm going to copy this one in. Right. Show it again. So a default radio button looks like this, right? Now, most people just don't like this one, right? So what you could do is you can use the same framework to create much better looking radio buttons. And you can even have them slightly refactored, because this one has, it used to have different colors on every one of them. And if you don't want that, I can show you in the style sheet. Maybe I'm going a little bit too quick now, but so this is the definition of a radio button. It's an input of the type radio, and it has a group that it belongs to. So this group is called language 2. So all of these have the language 2 name to it. So that means they belong together, right? So if you put them inside of these classes, then they will show up as danger. So if I change this one to, let's say, radio, what's the other one? Danger, so the other one is, what is it, warning? Oh, success. That's the one I know for sure. So they use the same styles for that, right? So what you now probably will see, if I refresh it, and it doesn't, because I made a mistake. Oh, I've only done it on this one now. You can also do that for the whole group, but you have to change the styles a little bit. So I made this one to the success color. If you want to do that to the whole group, then you have to put a div around it and get the styling for the particular colors, so the primary colors, out of the individual radio buttons and put it in a group. So I now made this one, made radio primary, so they all have the same color. Now, this is another example of some additional library that you can pull into Bootstrap and make it even more attractive. And the same goes for selects. I'm going to show you the select page before I move on to creating reusable components. No, I'm just going to do the Angular part, I guess. So this is a basic select. Just put in a couple of the bands I like. And it doesn't look like much, right? So there's, again, a small library that you can use to extend it. I'm just going to open it up all at once. Right. So, and this library, particular library, it's called Bootstrap Select. It's not part of Bootstrap, but it has a clever name, right? Bootstrap Select sounds like it's part of Bootstrap, which it isn't. So you have to pull in the CSS. In this particular case, it has a JavaScript file, which is called the Bootstrap Select minimum JS. So if I pull in this particular code, and I'm refreshing the page, it looks like crap now, because I've done something wrong, I guess. I always do something wrong. This div doesn't seem to end at the right place. Let's see if I can pull it in all together, just to save some time. Oh, crap. I need to pull in the individual lines. Yep. I probably got some div wrong somewhere. Well, just to see if it does now, what it does. Maybe I removed the div somewhere. This one goes with that one. Why does it say that? Element select is not closed. Oh, yeah, crap. That's why it didn't work, right? So I immediately added another element of this particular nice little framework to do this, is that I created option groups. So I created 2 option groups to it. So I sort of switched it between heavy rock and Mali blues. So basically, this particular little framework called Bootstrap Select, and there's whole lots of other options you can use with it. You can do typing and searching, you can do multiple select with it, and it's a really nice little framework. You just pull it in, and your selects look a lot better than this one, right? They look much better aligned within Bootstrap. So Bootstrap itself doesn't do this. So this is really cool stuff, I think. So those are all the small libraries that you want to have. So it's the multiple select again, so stuff like that. See? That's cool, right? And it's just, you pull in the style sheet, you pull in the JavaScript, done. So, for the last part, it took me a little bit longer to get here than I hoped to, is that if you build larger websites, you will want to reuse your components. You don't want to type in a button with an image in front of it and have it different on every page, right? So if you have like 100 pages, and you keep on copying, for instance, the navbar, or jumbotrons, or UI elements, you would want to create some reusable components to do that. Now, there's different ways of doing that, and there's different frameworks, of course, that support. All of the frameworks that render the HTML on the server side, like ASP.NET and JSF, you won't have any trouble doing that. You can just define your controls in ASP.NET, and you're fine. Same goes for Razor and ASP.NET MVC and stuff like that. But if you're on the client side and you're building your website just pure from HTML and JavaScript, well, there is some trouble. Now, luckily, there are frameworks that actually support you to build these reusable components fairly easy. Now, I'm not a big JavaScript expert. I'm also not a big JavaScript fan. I think it's just a horrible language anyway, which should be made illegal. But it's there out there, and people are creating legacy with it, lots of it these days. So we will keep on maintaining this rubbish in JavaScript for the next 30 years or so. So if you do JavaScript, please move to something that is slightly more type-safe, like TypeScript, and generate your JavaScript instead of just writing it. And to give you proof of the fact that TypeScript does that really good is that the new version of Angular, now Angular has become sort of the leading web framework at this point in time. So it took over all the knockouts and the embers of this world, and it's now basically moved into, this is the framework you need to use if you build just plain HTML and JavaScript applications. And it's quite good. But the new version of Angular, which is still coming out, I think, the 2.0 version, was not built in JavaScript. It was written in TypeScript. And they generated out the JavaScript for it. Now, if you can do that with a framework like Angular, that means there's no reason for you to be typing JavaScript yourselves. Because typing that in TypeScript, which looks very, very familiar if you're familiar with JavaScript, is much easier because there's much more type checking in there. And it's a fairly better language. And it generates out, or it compiles actually, to JavaScript. So you can put the JavaScript in your application and it will run. So that's a good thing. So I've done a little bit of work on Angular, so I'm going to show you a bit of it. And then I'll leave it with that. I'll keep the razor syntax for those of you who want to know that in the break or whatever. So what it will do, Angular, is it consists of different modules. So I created a module called demo. And within the module, you can add stuff to it. Now, there's lots of stuff you can add to it. The basic stuff that I will do is that I will create a controller, which is basically sort of setting the scope for my page or my element or whatever I'd use it for. And I will create some directives. Now, I created this one this morning, so it's an easy one. I just will create a new one. So I'm bad at typing JavaScript, so bear with me if that's will really work. I'm first going to show you the ones I do have already. So I create a bunch of directives. Now, directives are sort of like the reusable UI components of Angular. And you can do all sorts of funny stuff with it. And it's fairly okay. You can add content to it and stuff like that. And I'll try to create a very simple one. Oh, you know what? I'm just going to reuse this one. So I'm going to create a directive called DevWeek. Now, it uses this notation, this camel case notation, but it will also translate that for you. So the Angular compiler will do that at runtime. It will translate it to something with the underscore in it. So there's lots of different formats you can use for naming these controls, but the names they will get in your application will be similar to what you're used to with web controls. I'll show you in a sec. And you can say it's restricted to working on attributes and elements. I'm not going to explain the whole of Angular here, but I'm going to do a slightly short demo. It's like, you know what, I'm going to create a template, because it uses templates. Maybe I'm going to point this one to devweek.com. Maybe put HTTP, whatever, blah, blah, blah in it. I always forget whether to put whether it's these or the other ones. For some reason, I always forget. So I'm created a danger button with a span in it, and you know there's the font awesome thing again, and I'll probably say, well, DevWeek website. So I created a control that has a template, and that I can use on pages that use this particular module. So there's the module demo. So what you need to do in your HTML to get this thing working is that you need to say that the Angular app, so NG is short for Angular, the Angular app is the demo module. So it will refer to this particular model in your JavaScript part of your logic, right? And then if you do that, it will be able to use the directives you've created here. So it will rename this one to actually be this one. So this particular control I have here is actually referring to the directive here. So hopefully if it works, but you never know because it is JavaScript, right? It will allow you to create controls called DevWeek in an HTML page, because this is still basically an HTML block, right? I've also done a Jumbotron, of course. And with the Jumbotron, I've done some additional stuff to it. Instead of having my template in line here, I'm referring to actually a file where my template sits. So I've put the Jumbotron in a separate HTML file. So this HTML file now contains the control I'm using. So instead of using the template property here, I'm using the template URL here. I'll show you the Jumbotron green because I put it somewhere in my directives directory, which is here. So basically, this is the thing it will create. You still here? Is that okay? Okay. So this is the code. It will actually put in at the location where I needed the Jumbotron. Oh, crap. I need to go to the other page. So if I use this one, the Jumbo Green, which I did somewhere on top here. Oh, right here. Here it is. It will create the Jumbotron for me. And you can use, if you put this out, so the next step, and that's probably the last step for this talk, is the one where I actually didn't pull this one in my, you don't want to have this in your HTML page, right? You want to have this in separate pages as well. So if I show you this page, open it up in the browser. It takes a while because I'm loading Angular, I think, from a CDN. So here's the button I created. So it's just the button called DevWeek, which means this particular button well, if I get the directives out and move them in a separate file, I can use that in all of my pages, and it will look the same every time again and again and again. So buttons are one of the items that you might do it for, but the same goes for, especially for composite controls, right? Like an input group with an input element and stuff like that. You want to have custom elements for all of that. So the input element that I showed you that had the little envelope on the right side and it has the label, you could create a directive from that called the input email, for instance, right? And you can, everywhere you use it, it will look the same. And if you want to change the look and feel of this particular element, you change it in its separate HTML file, which it pulls in every time again and again. And it will have changed on all of your pages, right? The same you want to do with your navbars, for instance. If you have a navbar containing all sorts of links, you don't want to write that and copy that out, all of the HTML in every one of these pages. You want to create a separate element and reuse that. Now, Angular is good at that, right? So here's the button I created. It will probably roll off to the DevWeek website. If I click on it, I'm not going to do that. So what you probably have noticed is that there's text in here. Now, I didn't tell how to do that, but I will not tell you that now. So if I look at my Jumbotron green, it has these tags in it, right? It has Jumbo title, Jumbo description, and it also has save link. That doesn't really add to it, but I'm going to use these two. Now, what you can do with these directives is, because they're not always static, right? You want to add your own data to it. So the way you do that in an Angular application is, it doesn't use, where is it? Oh, this is just a static one. I'm going to move to the next page. So,
It's there, so
what, sorry?
that's the title and description of your controller.
Yeah, this is the scope, but I haven't set the scope yet. So I need to do that. That is strange. How does that know? How does it know that? Where's my Jumbotron green? Does it already have the text in there? No, it doesn't. That is strange. Can't see why it works, but it works. Typically JavaScript.
Within the controller, Jumbotron controller, right?
Oh yeah, sorry, that's what it is. Right, thanks. So I've put in the controller, I've put in a bunch of stuff here. And here is something I called scope. So every controller in Angular has a particular element that's called scope. And the scope can be used on all of the elements that are inside of this controller thing. So I added the Jumbo controller here in this particular div, which means if there's an element inside of this, it will be able to use the variables from scope. Now there is a variable called Jumbo, and I'm using that as the model for my Jumbotron. So it will look at these elements and figure it out and try to replace that. Now this is one of the steps. I'm going to show you the last step because I'm running a bit over time, where you can actually pull this stuff out. So there's another page, and what I've done here is I created separate files for my directives and separate files for my controller. So I put them in the directives directory. So there's a Jumbo again, and it uses something called a model. And if I look at the controller that comes with this one, if I can find where it is, where did I put it? Right there. You can see that I created a controller, which I put inside of a module called my controllers, and it has a Jumbo thing here, which is basically the same thing as I had on the other page. But now, if I want to use this on my page, yeah, I can use it like this. Now, what it now will do, it will say that the model element of my Jumbo directive will be set to Jumbo of its containing controller. So I've created a main controller, which is the one I just shown you. And what it will do is it will figure out what the model is on this one, which is Jumbo. So going back to the controller for a sec, it will say, okay, I'm going to use these elements here and give that to the directive, or actually generate the code out that using this directive. Now, of course, this is getting slightly more complicated than it was. Of course, I need also to define the directive. So I've created a file with a bunch of directives in it. So there's a modal in it, and there's a Jumbotron in it, and there's a navbar in it. And now I can use all this stuff here. Now, if I look at the definition of this Jumbotron directive, it will use the HTML file that actually defines what it looks like. right? So if you want to change the look and feel of all your Jumbotrons, just go to this HTML file, open it up, change it, and it will have changed all of your controls using this type. And it will have its own scope, right? And the scope, I call that the model, but you can name it anything you like. And it is set to something called the model. So if there is a model defined in my page here, which is this one, it will use that as its scope. And there's another thing I definitely need to show you, that is, most of these controls, you want to be able to put stuff in there without having to define it in your scope. Now, there's an interesting element inside of AngularJS, which is called transclude. Now, if you put that to true on your directive, also, by the way, I need to say there's the replace thing. So if you set replace to true, what it will do, it will remove this particular element, my jumbo. Otherwise, it will leave it in, because the DOM doesn't recognize it anyway, so you can just leave it in. But it looks nicer if you just replace it with the directive that you have, right? So what it will do, the transclude element, is that inside of this particular element called my jumbo. So this is not an HTML element, right? This is our own element we created. Inside of my jumbo, I put in this is a test. So I'm not going to put in, this is my final DevWeek demo on Angular, right? JS dot whatever. So what it now will do, because of the transclude property set in my directives, which is here, it will find the element inside of this particular file, so the myjumbo file, which I will jump to now. Where is it? Right there. It will find the element that has the ng transclude tag attached to it. So this is typically an Angular tag, right? And what it will say is, so the content I provide for my page, going back to the page, which is the sentence, this is my final DevWeek demo on AngularJS, will be put inside of the element that holds the transcluder. So my actual sentence from the page, Angular will put it actually inside of this thing. So if I now show the page, what you will see is that if I open it up in the browser, it takes a while to load because it gets jQuery from the CDN. So this is what it looks like without jQuery and without finding all the elements, and there it is. So see, this is the text I put in there, and it will put it actually inside of the directive that you've created. So you can do all sorts of nice stuff with these elements in it. And you should really be, if you're building larger websites, looking at building these reusable components. There's other technologies that you can use. I'm sorry I don't have the time to show that in Razor as well, but in Razor, it's just a piece of cake, right? So you build your own sections and your helpers and stuff like that, if you're familiar with it, so it works quite well. Probably the last thing I did, didn't work. So I have to stop because I'm already running 10 minutes over time. So I hope to have been able to give you a fair introduction of what Bootstrap can do for you. Let me round it up by showing one slide or two slides. It is, for me, by far the best UI framework there is out there, the most complete. And especially what is good is that there's lots of additional resources for it. So there's lots of websites that you can go to and find little snippets and pull that into your application, like the cards element that I was hoping to show. And, website, the slides don't show up for a sec. I have two IDEs open, and my laptop doesn't bear with that. So I'm going to give you the final page on this. So if you're building websites, and you want to get rid of all this mumbo-jumbo you need to pull in to make this happen, move to Bootstrap. It will make your life so much easier. And it's actually, as a developer, you know, I love to code, also in my free time. It is very hard to pull this stuff away. Every time you get there, you think, oh, what happens if I do this? Or maybe I can do this as well. And it gets nicer and nicer. And you start looking things up, and it grows bigger and bigger. And you can do all sorts of funny stuff with it. Unfortunately, then I would take like a day to show you all of the funny stuff you can do with it. So in retrospective, if you start moving this is an advice I always give. First, try it out. Make sure it works, try to find out all the basics, and only then do it right, and then make it better, try to work at the reusable components, because that's the tougher part on this thing, and I'm going to skip these two, they don't belong in this particular slide deck. And most of all, have fun with it. So I promise to give you the text. So this is I'm giving a slide deck to the DevWeek conference. So this is my Agile book. If you go to this website and put in this password and this discount code, I think you'll get a 20 or 30% discount on this particular book. The last thing I needed to tell you is where the repos are. So I've put in both of the repos, both the Razor demo, which I didn't do now, and the Bootstrap demo, of which most of these examples come from. I've put them in these two repositories on GitHub. If you need more information or if you want to know more, this is my Twitter tag, works really well. And this is my email address, my own email address for my own company, which I have since 6 weeks. And that's about it. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope it gives you a fair idea of what you can do with Bootstrap. I hope it wasn't too basic, and I'm very much looking forward to your feedback, because this is a session I'll probably do more, maybe even create a full-day workshop out of it. Anything now? I have to duplicate it. But so I hope my internet connection will remain to work. Also, I need to mention that all of the code I have in the demos, that's even more than I'm going to show you, lots of additional stuff to it. I've put it in a GitHub repo, so this is the name of the repo, Hoogendoorn, which is my Twitter tag, Bootstrap demo. There's another one called Razor demo, and you can also look at that as well. It's just public repositories. So the last website I built before I went on to do stuff in Bootstrap, yep, is it moving on? It's not that fast. It's running on Azure website, so it's not available. Oh, there it is, right? This here is the website we built. Now, to me, it looks quite nice. But I have spent probably a couple of months getting it to look like this. So it evolves, right? You spend hours and hours, then you move it again. And it is a lot of work, and it's very elaborate. This is, if you would look at the responsiveness of this website, it is okay-ish, right? It moves and moves and moves until it sort of breaks. See here, this is where it breaks down, right? Now, getting this stuff responsive, using media queries to say, okay, if the width of my browser is between this and this, you have to do it like that, and that is, it's annoying, right? It's frustrating to say at the least. And it's always hard to get it right. So if I put it back on in normal size, it looks okay, right? And this is part of the trouble, because you want your websites to be much more responsive, and you don't want to have to spend a lot of time in doing that. Now, going back to the slides, because I have only got a few more. That's the stuff I did before that, and it took me a lot of time, and I hated that. Now, then Bootstrap came on my path. Now, Bootstrap was invented by some guys at Twitter. I just found a screen grab a couple of days ago about what Twitter looked like when they first came out. It was horrible. I'll show you the picture. This is what it looked like. This is Twitter in 1998 or whatever it was. Horrible, right? Well, it looked like it was built in the 90s, right? And it was. Eventually, they came up with this framework to be able to build their website more easily and maintain it easier and make it responsive for different sizes, so you could use it on your iPad and on your tablet and on your phone and et cetera, et cetera. So it has, and they didn't want to build different versions for every, well, let's say for every resolution. So they started building this framework, which is now available as Bootstrap. So they made it open source. You can just look at the code, and it's just out there. Stuff that isn't in there that you need to find additional libraries for, and I'm going to show you some of that stuff as well. Some stuff to sort of beautify your website even more. And hopefully in the end, I will also try to show you one of the big issues I've always had with web development is there's no reusable UI components, right? If you're just doing plain a JavaScript, HTML, CSS website, you always have trouble with stuff. For instance, if you have a navigation bar or a menu on the top of all of your pages, and you want that to be the same one, usually what people do is they copy it around. Now, if you have 2 pages, you'll be all right. But if you have a big website of, let's say, a couple of hundred pages, you will be in trouble, right? So you need some form of reusable components. Now, I've been doing ASP.NET for quite a few years, and you can easily do that with ASP.NET, right? So I'm going to show you some of the other techniques that you can use for that. So I have to introduce myself a bit, right? For those of you who don't know me, my name is Sander. I'm a sort of independent dev mentor trainer, software architect programmer. My current assignment is, I just started as an independent 6 weeks ago, so this is a new phase of my life. Got divorced, got a new girlfriend, bought a new house, quit my job over the last, let's say, few months, right? So this is all totally new. So this insurance company in the Netherlands hired me to move their current technology stack, which is basically a mainframe and a bunch of really huge Java applications, into a microservices world. So we are building very, very small components on the server side, and we're building very, very small web applications, but a ton of them, right? So there's no way that we could do without reusable components. Now, this particular Java, I don't suppose you're in the Java space, right? Usually Java people don't go to DevWeek. Okay, so none of you is a Java developer. So in Java, there's also this framework which looks a lot like ASP.NET, just with horrible syntax, because it's Java, right? So we built a whole library of reusable components, and that was a good starting point for us. But you can do that using other technologies. So I'm going to show you a bit about Angular. So this is not going to be an introduction to Angular, because Shay's already done that, I think, yesterday, because he flew out already in the middle of the night. But I'm going to show you how to build some small reusable components using Angular. I'm going to show you our own code examples from JSF, and I'm also going to show you that in a Razor syntax as well. So if I get there, right, because I haven't got a clue to how to time this thing. So bear with me. So this is what I'm going to do, right? So this is my personal website. A lot of stuff on there, a lot of stuff on Agile, on modeling requirements, on software architecture, on microservices, stuff like that. This is my Twitter tag if you feel the need to tweet about this. I hope to get your response because this is the first time, so I'm really happy with your feedback afterwards. I wrote a couple of books. Yeah, Good morning, everybody. Nice of you to show up. I hope the microphone's okay, and can you hear me in the back as well? Okay, good. So, to be quite honest, I've done quite a few talks at conferences. If you were here last year, you would have seen probably that I did the opening keynote and stuff, and I did an interesting talk yesterday on tools in agile projects. And this one is totally different. To be quite honest, this is the first time I'm doing this talk. So I just invented it. More or less last week. The reason I'm doing this thing is that I've been building web applications for I don't know how long, very, very long time. And I've always struggled with the stuff that's in the CSS and how to deal with all the elements in the UI and in the DOM, et cetera, et cetera. And it's always given me a hard time. Now, I'm not really sure. Are you all experienced in web development, or? Not all of you? Oh, that's good, because I'm going to do this really slowly, I hope. And I've been troubled with dealing with CSS and getting stuff lined out and getting the pixels right. And if you've done that, you know how elaborate that can be, right? And it can be quite frustrating as well. So have you seen Joe Natale's session yesterday in the morning? He talked about the UX and the user experience and stuff like that. It was a really amazing session. And the thing is, there is designers and there's developers, right? And developers usually don't know shit about how to do web design. So I'm one of them, right? I haven't got a clue either. So last year, when I was here at DevWeek, I stepped into a session of Shay Friedman, who did a very brief introduction into Bootstrap. And I thought, hey, I need to try this out. I've been building websites all along. It cost me a lot of time to get the UI right. And I looked at Bootstrap and I thought, this will be my savior. Well, being in a church, that's a big word, of course, but it's sort of, well, as Shay puts it, Bootstrap will actually save your life. You can, as a developer, build great-looking websites without big effort. And they really look really nice, right, if you do that. I'll show you one example, because the majority of this talk, I only have a few slides just to do some introduction, and I'll just start typing in stuff and see where it goes from there. So I'm actually going to improvise for over an hour, And hopefully you will bear with me, and hopefully it will work. So I'm going to show you some of the more basic elements in Bootstrap. I'm going to show you what else is there in Bootstrap. But the thing is, you can find a lot of stuff online. So I'm not going to show you all of the elements that are in Bootstrap, because there's quite a lot of them, and it's growing and growing. So there's lots of stuff to choose from. There's also some stuff, not much for you in it, because this one's in Dutch, and this one too, this one is in German. But there's also the US version of my Agile book, which is out on Amazon. I'll give you a discount code at the end of the session anyway. So, and I'm also a programmer, as I mentioned. I'll give you one example of that. Stupid story. I was working for the Dutch Social Security Agency, and we were building a web application on top of their huge COBOL installation, sort of like service-oriented architecture stuff in place. And what they wanted is, because they had a lot of users that are using this application, and they were used to using desktop applications. Now, what they wanted is that you couldn't leave a page as soon as you started typing in fields, right? So just to be sure that changes were never forgotten. So you could not move to another tab, you could not close the browser, type in another URL, stuff like that. I had to prevent that using JavaScript. So I was sort of figuring this out, and of course you'd start first with putting alerts on your page, right? You click on another tab, okay, an alert pops up. Now, while I was doing that, the project manager of the project, he was like, oh, so I was the software architect for this project, and he said, you think we could do a demo for the CEO of the Social Security Agency? I said, well, you could always try. There's probably some untested code in there, but if you want to do that, be my guest, right? And so he went off and he did the demo. And after an hour, I got an email from him, live from doing the demo, and he said to me, what do you think there's any more of these alerts popping up on screen? So this is what I do. I built these little alerts in my pages, and well, I didn't get fired, so anyway, I was lucky. So basically, this will be more or less the agenda. So this is the introduction. I'm going to show you a bit about Bootstrap. I'm just going to show you the website, what it looks like, and then we'll start typing from there. I'll explain to you what the grid system does, because that's by far the strongest element in Bootstrap. The grid system they have, which is very easy to use, makes it possible to build responsive applications, right? So if you close the browser, an error, it will change the views, and I'll show you how to do that. Then we'll move on to a bit of buttons. You always have some buttons, and I'll show you how easy it is to create great buttons in Bootstrap. We'll walk through inputs, checkboxes, radio buttons, stuff like that, fonts and icons and stuff like that. And of course, the inevitable Jumbotron. For those of you who don't know what a Jumbotron is, I'll show you a couple of those. That is by far the most interesting element in Bootstrap, because it makes your websites look as if they were built in 2015, right? And then I'll move on a bit to reusable components, and hopefully this will sort of fit in 1.5 hours. But I haven't got a clue yet, so we'll figure it out, right? So before using Bootstrap, I was building web applications as well. I'll show you the last one I did before I moved to Bootstrap. And I'm still thinking of moving this one to Bootstrap. So it's actually, I'm just going to show you the thing. You probably won't be able to see here. So that is basically what you can do. So I'm now going to show you some of the work I did with Bootstrap, and then move on to the typing, right? So this is the current website we're building for the client. It's sort of an internal website it's an insurance company, so it's for their own employees. So it's basically not a website, basically it's a web application. And it will also be done by insurance agents. They will use that as well. And in the end, also, Joe Public will start using it as well. So these are some of the elements already in there, like this is a card. I'll show you how to use that card item later on. And it has screens there, you fill in data, and it has grids, and it has buttons, et cetera, et cetera. Now this is all, it has a very clean layout, and I like that a lot. So I'll show you some more examples. So this is a typical Bootstrap message box. Now, doing the styling for this, I personally did that. So I'm the CTO at this company. You wouldn't expect me to do the styling on the website, but I love doing this, right? I'm a developer. And it only took me, well, the first version looked a bit different. That took me about between half a day and a day. And I restyled it a couple of months ago, and it now looks like this. That took me about 2 hours. So when it comes to saving time on UI development, Bootstrap is your friend. And basically, that's the message I hope to give you during this session, is that if you do websites, and if you haven't got a clue how to do that, move over to Bootstrap, because it will save your life. that was the message. Okay, thank you for being here. And so the next slide is actually the in retrospective slide, right? So this is what I have in slides. So let's do some typing, right? Now I'm starting to improvise. I haven't got a clue to where we go. So let's see. Let's first close off PowerPoint. That saves a lot of memory. This is an old laptop. I bought a new one, but I haven't got it yet. Let's close the browser. Oh, I don't need to close the browser. Let's open it up again. I'm going to start with showing you the Bootstrap website, so you can get an overview of what's all in there. So Bootstrap is on the URL called getbootstrap.com. And you have to mind that there's different versions. So the current version is the 3.something version. Oh, sorry. Up. So this is the Bootstrap. So this is a Jumbotron, right? This big thing that fills the screen. Now the resolution on my laptop is not that high. I probably could set it higher, but you won't be able to read the code. But it sort of changes with every different resolution you might have. So here, this is another Jumbotron, by the way. And this is the overview. If you look at what's in there, there's a very good starting page. And I'm going to copy